I'd now like to privileged to invite Miss Primrose Nanchani Manyalo, who's the Programme Coordinator for Restless Development in Zimbabwe, to make the next presentation. Please go ahead. We're just awaiting a PowerPoint presentation.
All right, I had a technical glitch. President of the General Assembly, Excellencies, distinguished delegates, my fellow youth here and following around the world, ladies and gentlemen. Let me begin by thanking you for this opportunity to be a voice for the billions of young people across the world, to share our collective thoughts, views pertaining to how the world should look like beyond 2015. Good ideas are born not by suppression of youth voices, but by inclusion and meaningful participation. My presence here today is an indication that we are surely in the right direction towards creation of a more inclusive, transparent, and sustainable framework. I'm Primrose Manyalo. I work for Restless Development in Zimbabwe, and I'm here representing the major group for children and youth. Think back to 14 years ago. I was just a little girl in high school in Zimbabwe when the Millennium Development Goals were formed. And today, as a young lady, together with the majority of young people around the world, we are living to enjoy the results of decisions that were made without us, prime amongst them being lack of care, protection from violence, high unemployment rate, high HIV prevalence rate, and exclusion from decision-making processes. Today, we declare that as young people and children, we are an important asset. We have a lot of positive and restless energy, vital for coming up with a framework that is more inclusive, a framework that is more transparent and sustainable. In my country, I led post-2015 youth consultation processes, which reached out to over 800 young people from rural areas and high-density areas. The process included employment of youth-friendly methodologies, offline discussions, community-based campaigns, use of youth icons such as famous musicians, alternative forms of media, painting, posters, discussions. Young people freely gave insight on the visions and concerns for how they want the world to look like beyond 2015. This was one of the 13 youth consultations that was conducted globally with the major aim of understanding young people's visions beyond 2015. The strengths of the processes included embracing the diversity of young people. We reached out to young people in rural areas, high-density areas, differently abled, young people living with HIV and AIDS, orphans and vulnerable children. Over 70 languages were used and 64 different ethnicities. They were ultimately involved in analyzing the inputs and writing up the results in what you see there as the youth voices on a post-2015 world. Ultimately, the youth consultations led to the participation in high-level panel meetings, such as the Monrovia and London high-level panel meeting. More broadly, young people's views were welcomed, and the high-level panel feedback showed that they appreciated the views and visions of young people. Much of the input from young people in the youth consultations were taken into consideration in the high-level report, which stated that young people and children must be subjects, not objects, of the post-2015 agenda. Although youth engagement has been very high in the post-2015 youth process, as compared to when the MDGs were formulated, it has not been an easy process. The challenges we faced included language barriers, limited knowledge of existing policies, inadequate funding, and limited capacity to demand accountability. Although we faced these challenges, we rose to the occasion where we were engaged. We were quick to grasp the concepts around advocacy and leadership, the MDG formulation process, and giving our views towards the world we envisioned beyond 2015. I experienced firsthand the infuriation of young people upon realization of their exclusion and the nature of the development processes that are happening, that they were the forgotten generation whose views had been left out at the preliminary MDG formulation phase. We support this vision and reinforce that when given capacity and full support, we can and are able to shape the world that we want to live in. Inspired by Mahatma Gandhi, we want to be the change that we wish to see in the world. However, this can only be possible if our participation is more than just a tick box, is not tokenistic, and definitely not an afterthought. We firmly believe that the following tools and mechanisms will enhance the creation of a more sustainable and transparent framework. Creation of spaces and channels that enable young people to contribute to the formulation and monitoring of policies and programs which affect them. I'll give you an example of Uganda. There is an SMS text opinion poll where young people freely express their views. Upon doing that, the SMS text poll is reaching out to over 122,000 young people across Uganda. And then the U report sends a question on a particular youth issue via SMS text to these young leaders each week, who can respond either with a multi-menu-based reply or with personal messages. Their stories are then broadcast over regular radio shows or published in their local newspapers. This platform has given Ugandan youth an opportunity to speak and raise their voices on issues that are affecting their lives in respective communities. Children and young people's understanding of development frameworks needs to be communicated in a youth-friendly way. This is a potentially measurable target where young people have understanding of development frameworks and related policies and budgets. The use of ICT, social media, as an important means and opportunity with incorporation of offline strategies in order to reach the young people that are not yet connected through alternative forms of media, such as images, radios, and SMSs. Availability and accessibility of documents packaged in a youth-friendly and easy-to-digest manner, taking into account language use. So finally, what does this mean for post-2015? Children and youth participation to decision-making and international development processes must be included in the post-2015 framework. The framework must be fair, include responsible and accountable governance, since it was a top priority reflected by young people's views. We must ensure that children and young people are included in the framework as a cross-cutting area and not just limited to engagement in typical youth issues. Participation must not be limited to the sideline. It must lie at the core framework. There must be a specific goal on governance and target that ensures young people's roles in decision-making and policies and allocation of resources in all areas that affect their lives. A SDG framework will not deliver for children and young people if their participation is not formally included. This includes establishment of a more local, national, international, civic participation opportunities for young people and children. Children and young people must also be at the center of monitoring and accountability mechanisms of the framework. There must be a two-way flow of communication between governments and citizens. Open data is not enough to make data accessible we must also create users for this data. Hence, there is need for capacity building and sensitization of children and young people. We must have programming designed to build the capacity of young people to collect and validate data, ensuring youth-led and youth-friendly monitoring and evaluation systems. All of this should also be rooted in the realities of children and young people and should be contextually relevant to address the grassroots and the needs of young people. In the words of Nelson Mandela, he says that they cannot begin a revelation of a society's soul than the way in which it treats its children. This framework will reveal the caliber of people that we are, whether we care for our future and the future of children and young people. It is our collective duty to put our efforts together to build a framework that will shape the world into a beautiful and safe place for everyone, particularly for children and young people. This is more than an obligation to restore hope, sunshine into the hearts of young people. I thank you.